and she has 4 boys. And when I tell you they're like stair steps, and it's so funny, she told me that when she gets home, she works a 9 to 5 and she does real estate on the side, that what she has is a corner in her house, literally.
Mm.
And she has a chair in that corner. She has a glass that she has set up in that corner. And she, and she has a sign, right, for the summer school. She has a little sign that's available and it says, Mom needs 5 minutes. And so whenever she has that, she said her sons are trained. And this sounds so bad, y'all, but it was so cute to me. Her sons are trained to say, Mommy, do you need daddy to fill up your cup? Because she knows and has trained her house that when mommy needs 5 minutes, mommy goes to her corner and she calls it her personal timeout corner. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of But Clearly Podcast. We're so glad to be back with you all again today. If you only knew what it took to get us all ready for this particular episode. And today we're talking about self-care, and clearly all 3 of us need it. So go ahead, sit back, relax, get ready to join us for another awesome conversation. Got my sisters here with me. What's up, Shavonda? How are you?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
Good. And we have the lovely Renita that she took time away from Matlock to join us today, you guys. Renita, what's going
You're
on?
such a hater. You're such a hater. But I'm great.
Good. So we're making reference, if you guys did not watch our last episode about being a binge watcher, we will have the link below so you can go back and watch that episode as well. But today we're talking about something that is so important, especially for women. We're talking about self-care. And how many times do we forsake ourselves because we're trying to take care of everybody else? So today we're going to explore, when do you know it's time to participate in self-care? Some of the things that we like to do when it comes to self-care. And then we want you to also join in on the conversation. So let's kick it off, ladies, with talking about what are some of your signs and triggers to say, you know what? It's time for some self-care that I've been putting off. I'm curious to know.
I think for me, some of the signs when I can't seem to function in my normal flow. I'm a multitasker, like the ultimate multitasker. So if I'm juggling a ton of things and I don't feel myself being effective in my juggling, it's kind of like, okay, wait a second. Maybe we need a moment to take pause and regroup and then refresh ourselves to come back to do the things that we know we typically are able to get done in a much better way. Not to mention, if I, go home a couple times feeling like I need to listen to brown liquor songs on the way.
What?
Because the people have worn me out. Okay. That's a way that I know that it's time to take a moment and get in some self-care.
For those of you that don't know what brown liquor songs are, you might want to consult Urban Dictionary. That may help you in understanding.
Because I clearly don't know what that means. I have no idea. None. Well, I will say for me, I know when it's time for me to have some self-care. I would agree with Nee in terms of my flow. Having to juggle a lot of things. Sometimes we don't necessarily have what's called, equal splits of everything, right? But we learn how to prioritize. And if I am not able to function fully in whatever that task is, or if my body tells me, which is not a good thing, like you shouldn't really wait until your body's like, it's time.
By then it's too late.
By then it's almost right. By then it's almost too late. But I will say that it is one of the things that will say to me, girl, sit down somewhere. So what about you, Lindy?
I think for me, I'm with you, Shavonda, when oftentimes I'm really bad about getting in self-care. And sometimes it's my body being completely depleted before I realize, oh yeah, I need to take some time for myself. But I've noticed like when my fuse is pretty short, so I've got certain folks that I talk to all the time. So if I'm on the phone with Renita and I'm like, I don't want to hear that today. Or if I'm on the phone with another friend, Jillian, and I'm just like, we're talking about normal stuff and they may not know it, but in the back of my mind, I'm like irritated at the conversation. Like I really don't care. If I see myself kind of having those self-talk moments, and I'm being honest, I do that sometimes where it's like, girl, you droning on and on. And if I see myself disconnecting from conversations with people that I genuinely care about because I'm overloaded in my brain, that usually is a trigger to me to say, slow down, stop a few minutes. You really need to engage in self-care so that you can fully connect to the people around you. So a lot of times when I go into a strong introversion, it's time for some self-care because I'm usually like, I cannot handle anything or anybody at
And
the
that's interesting because I'm like an introvert for real, like, and it's something that everybody knows. I'm like, even when it's a house full of people, sometimes I just veer off to my room just for a second to just this who I am. But you made a good point. When my brain is just like on overload, like I got 1,000 thoughts, and which I always typically do have 1,000 thoughts and 1,000 lists and 1,000 this and 1,000 that. But when it comes time for me to know this is time for self-care, it's like, okay, I need my brain to stop. I just need a minute. I just need a minute. Like when I say that or when I feel that, that's when I know, okay, you got to figure something out and do it.
Yeah, I think that's important. So I'm curious, not just about when you all know it's time to participate in self-care, but what are some of the things that you all do to engage in self-care? Because that looks like a lot of different things for different people. So the juicy part, what do you all do actually for self-care, big and small?
So for me, some of the things that I do, everybody that knows me knows I love the movies. That's my escape really from reality. And so there is nothing for me. There used to be times, I don't have time to do it now, but there used to be times where I would just take a day, commit a day, and just be in the movies all day long. Like I will watch 3 movies back to back to back. I don't have time for that now. But I do have a spot that I love to go to where it's like movie and dinner, so I can have the best of both worlds. And then spa day is essential for me. Like, and when I say spa, I don't necessarily mean mani and pedi because I'm at the place in my life where it takes me 3 hours to get that done. So now it's starting to feel like a chore. But like a massage, a facial, different things like that are good for me. And also, believe it or not, I love walking. When I walk, it just gives me a sense of calm and a sense of peace, which is something I need to get back into doing. But those are some things that I do for self-care.
How about
Nee?
you, me?
It just depends on what's going on in my world that would cause me to need to tap out, to tap back in.
Mhm.
So there are times where it could be as simple as a bubble bath. There could be times where it
Bubble
is
bath.
just let me just take a quick little drive up the highway and just take in the scenery, especially during the fall, driving, west and seeing the mountains and the foliage or whatever. Other times it could be, reading a good book or binge watching, like we were talking about on our last
Yeah.
episode. So it just kind of depends. And then there are other times where a good deep clean and declutter will help to unpack for me mentally and emotionally the things that are stored up. So while I'm throwing out the things in the refrigerator or I'm taking that pair of shoes out of the closet that I haven't worn in forever, guess what? That's kind of like me unpacking and unraveling. And by the time that it's done, you sit back and marvel and you relax. So it's work, but it helps.
Yeah, for me, there are so many things that both of you all said that resonate with me. Definitely once or twice a week, ladies, come closer. You should be doing this. Sit in some water. It's important. Taking a bath is always a wonderful thing, especially when I've got Epsom salt and lavender in it, it really calms me down. Like a day like today, I will be getting in some water and submerging. And that just kind of relaxes me. Another thing that I love to do, if we're talking about small things daily, is journal. So
Mhm.
maybe after a bath or after a good shower, I will sit down and I will just journal. And to Shavonda's point earlier, because my brain, I'm an overthinker anyway, and I overanalyze everything. It gives me a chance to get the thoughts out of my head and on paper so that I can move on to something else. So it feels like I'm unloading it, but unloading it in a way that's not to someone else, but in a way that's kind of healthy for me. So
Yeah.
that's one of the small things I do. But I'm like Shavonda, I'm all for a good spa day. Y'all, if you need a list, heck, I need to link the list below. I can give you spa destinations all across the continental US as well as Mexico and the Dominican Republic because I believe in a good spa. So sometimes I will take an entire day and just spend at the spa. And I say that even if you don't have the financial means, you don't have to go out and be all extravagant with it. But I do think you have to find some type of way. Before I could afford it, I would just sit down and be like, I'm going to get my nails painted, old school, not gel. Like
Mhm.
I'm going to have somebody else just paint my nails, or I would sometimes like to go and take a car ride in nature and just sit at a park and maybe eat my lunch at the park. That's the thing that really gives me natural self-care that's low cost is when I can just be in nature. I love the beach. I love a good park. So anytime I can
Mhm.
get to one of those areas, that's always a way for me to kind of get back grounded, so to speak, with myself and with God.
And I love candles. Like I love just it's something about a lit candle in a clean house that does something to my soul. So like a nice 3 wick candle, or music, just to just sit back, nothing else, just nothing but quiet and just some good worship music. And then also on the spiritual aspect, y'all know I'm gonna bring it up at some point in any of our conversations, but for me, self-care is important for me to pray, like just practical prayers, just talking to the Lord, just kind of calms me and keeps me centered, keeps me focused on, sometimes we get so overwhelmed with the what that we forget about the why. And, is something that helps me to kind of stay on track as to why I'm doing what I'm doing, and brings peace to my mind concerning that.
I think that is so important. So I know we're throwing out things that we like to do, but I want to dig into it a little bit further about why we don't always initiate self-care
Mhm.
and not necessarily I don't want to call them excuses, but the reasons that we put ourselves last on the list because we know we need it. We know it's good for us, but sometimes we don't prioritize that in the way that we prioritize everything else. So I'm curious to hear from you all. Why do you think, not just for yourself, but why do you think women in particular often forsake self care?
I think that it's the reality that we are the nucleus. And when we stop, everything stops. And so it's if everything's got to keep going, if I fall apart, then let me just make sure that everything keeps going.
Mhm.
But the sad part about that is that if we don't prioritize ourselves and we don't take the time to make sure that, hey, I'm in tune and I'm in the best mental, spiritual, physical space that I can be in, for as much as I'm getting done, I'm just not getting it done at its maximum capacity because I'm fragmented in how I'm functioning. So it's moving, but is it as excellent as it could be if I maybe just took a day or a couple hours to make sure that I make myself the priority? So, but I think that that's part of the reason why, because the expectation and demand on women is so great.
Hmm.
And I will have to also speak as a single mom. Sometimes you literally like don't have a break, right? There are some people out there who don't have the benefit of calling someone else to say, hey, can you babysit my kids so I can go to the spa all day? Or um, can you babysit my kids so I can drive up the mountain? And that's a reality that I certainly want to acknowledge, because I've been there before. And it's been times where I've just ran. But the reality is, even in those moments, like Yolanda was saying, it's important to find small ways. You might not be able to do the big thing, but be very specific about small things. It might be when your child goes to school, maybe you take off half the day. Maybe you, just take a couple of hours to go to your favorite show, or maybe you take the kid to the park where they have music playing if you like live music. I would encourage the viewers to just find creative ways, even if your circumstances try to dictate to you that you can't. Find a way that you can. And for years, I'm talking, I went to school full time, work full time, had kids. I was at every event, every extracurricular activity, and it felt like I did not have space. But if I had to take a step back, and through prayer, I was able to identify those small ways to do it. And now that my children are bigger, I can do, I still have flexibility. I still got to ask permission. I'm not out of the woods yet, but I do find that it's a little bit easier as the kids get a little bit older. But even when you say, well, trust me when I say I understand how it can be where you feel like you don't have the time or space or capacity, but you can get creative with it. I promise you, if you look again, you'll find a way to make it happen for you.
I
It's
think
important.
I think that's so good that you said that, Shavonda, because speaking from your experience, my experience, for those that are watching, I don't have kids, but I
Yeah.
want to also encourage, sometimes busyness looks different in
Mhm.
different ways. And so
Mhm.
even if you are, so like my busyness wasn't kids, but it was me running around and working around the clock, because I felt like, and sometimes my jobs felt like I had more flexibility because I didn't have a family to
Mm.
get so many things
Mm.
done. And I think it's important, whatever situation that you find yourself in, that you make sure that you're at the top of the priority list. And I want to piggyback on something Renita said, that if your perception is self-care is only when I'm broken down, and it means that everything stops, I would challenge your perception around self-care. I think that self-care is a tithe unto yourself. And so, and I use that term out because I am a church kid, y'all. But if you're not used to tithing, it's just taking off a tenth or taking off something off the top. I think if you can get to a point where you start to see prioritizing yourself gives me capacity to do things for other people, to Shavonda's point, even if it's a small ways, even if it's just saying, I'm going to do a 5-minute devotion, or I'm going to do a 5-minute journal, or I'm going to turn on YouTube, which is absolutely free, and let somebody, as long as they ain't too weird, take you through a 5-minute meditation. Or if I'm gonna let somebody for free, play string music in the background while I just kind of sit and be. One of the things that I love, I met a lady who's in real estate, and she has 4 boys. And when I tell you they're like stair steps, and it's so funny, she told me that when she gets home, she works a 9 to 5 and she does real estate on the side, that what she has is a corner in her house, literally.
Mm.
And she has a chair in that corner, one glass. I'm not saying that if this is not your thing, I'm not promoting, that you be drinking, but I'm just telling you what she does. She has a glass that she has set up in that corner, and she, and she has a sign. Hey, for the summer school. She has a little sign that's available, and it says, Mom needs 5 minutes. And so whenever she has that, she said her sons are trained. And this sounds so bad, y'all, but it was so cute to me. Her sons are trained to say, Mommy, do you need daddy to fill up your cup? Because she knows and has trained her house that when mommy needs 5 minutes, mommy goes to her corner, and she calls it her personal timeout corner. But she now, because she's made self-care a part of her regimen in her house, the whole house respects the fact. And she, again, she's married, so she has support, but she's now ingrained into her children. These 5 minutes are my 5 minutes, to the point she said 2 of her boys have created their own corners to say, I need 5 minutes when they're processing through their emotions. So
That's
again, I just
awesome.
want to encourage you to set
Yeah.
that standard, because if your children see you run yourself ragged, they've got the model of running themselves ragged too. But if they see you finding ways to take care of yourself, you're instilling that in them as well. So you all continue to jump in if you got thoughts.
You said something that was very thought provoking in her example. She set the tone for her self care, and a lot of times we make the mistake of allowing the circumstances around us to set the tone of what we can or can't dictate. But it's 24 hours in a day, and everybody has access to some type of calendar. If you have a phone, you have a calendar. And being very specific and very intentional about setting the tone in your house, setting the tone at your job. I mean, I just very recently I needed to take off, so I took off. It was a staycation. It was what it was, but I needed to take off. I just needed to step away. My job is very grueling, and I work lots and lots of hours. I won't get into that. But on my way out the door, the person who was supposed to cover me goes, "Oh, well, I don't have access to process any of the things that need to be processed while you're away." And the old Shavonda would have been like, I'm gonna have to work on my vacation. This Shavonda was like, oh, okay. And I kept right on out the door. And I'm taking my time off, and I'll see y'all when I get back. And so I'm gonna dictate that, what my situation is going to be. And it's so crazy. When I came back, when my manager saw that I was online, she was like, "Hey, what are you doing in the office? I thought you was off today." And I said, "No, I was off the last few days." But I love that she was also bought into what I set the tone for, to say, if I'm supposed to be off, I shouldn't be working. And so you got to make sure you begin to set the tone, because if not, the expectation will always be, on your day off, your job will call you, or on your day off, your kids will make plans for you. No, if I'm off and I'm off, we're not doing anything today, because mommy needs me time too. That's what I call it with my kids. It's me time, and I need it.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
think one I think one of the other things, just kind of picking pieces from both of you, that we also have to keep in mind, um, just like you said about tithing, with a lot in that time for the self-care. The prioritizing of your day is so important. So if
Mm.
you make sure that you, as you rise, don't let the first thing that you do be to grab your phone, see the latest post, whatever. The first thing that you should do, you should be prioritizing God first, because if you put him first at the top of your day, it makes it easier throughout the rest of your day. The Bible says, early in the morning will I seek thee. So I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So,
don't
and that's
do it.
Come on,
that's
don't
one
play
of
with
the
it now. Don't
things.
play with it.
Anyway,
The confidence
but
is
that,
rising up in the room.
I felt the
but that,
ghost.
but that for me is one of the things that, to a certain degree, I've got to get better at. I'm not an early riser ever. I do not like spring
The
forward.
total opposite of me.
I'm a fallback
A lot of
girl.
people tell you stories.
Every single time, I love to snuggle and hug onto those covers as long as I can. But I recognize, in the madness of all of the things that I have going on, the only way that everything is going to get accomplished the way that it needs to is I've got to condition myself and discipline myself to
That's the
get up,
word.
to get up earlier, to make sure that I spend that time, not just in my morning drive to the office, but spend that quality time of God first. And then when I find that I do that, and then I take care of my temple by way of exercise, and then I then go into what I have to do throughout the day or whatever, you find that you've got a little extra push, a little extra wind behind you, that helps you make it all, get done a bit better. And then you don't feel so empty by the
Yeah.
time, if you're normally running your race, and then it's like, I'm stopping to take care of me now because I'm depleted. So,
And I will say, like,
just
I'm
my 2
not
cents.
necessarily a fan of the word tithe because I feel like the tithe belongs to the Lord. But I will say I like the concept, but I would use the word investment instead. Self-care is an investment into your body, your soul, your mind, your future. Because as both of you have eloquently stated, if you don't take the time, then what? If you don't take the time to invest in self care for your situation, for your household, at a certain point, and y'all know, I mean, I have a testimony I could tell about putting off doctor's appointments, not going where I'm supposed, not taking care of my body, not getting proper rest, falling asleep on the couch, my neck gets jacked up, and then I'm bedridden for two months. So those are things that as a person you have to be very intentional about investing in yourself, because in the long run it's going to cost you more if you don't. It's well worth you upfront taking the time every day, every week, every month, every year to prioritize you. It's not a curse word, because if not, the results can be catastrophic. Like, it's just that deep.
I think one of the things that Nee touched on that I love, she talked about exercise. And I want to say, because oftentimes when you hear self care, especially now, it's all about the pamper
Zen.
part of it.
Yes.
Sitting down, is doing nothing, it's having a spa day. It is about a bunch of outward aesthetic stuff. But part of self care that you can do that's free daily is
Yeah.
drink the proper amount of water. It is sleeping. Exactly. It is sleeping the appropriate amount of hours. Like I have a friend right now
God help.
that she was like, Yolanda, I think I've only am operating on 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And I was talking to her and we were talking about something else. And I was like, the Lord ordains rest. I promise you, if you take those 2 hours of sleep, when you wake up, your brain is going to be able to function at a different capacity because it had a chance to get more oxygen back to it. That's just physical science. And so I think it's important too to think about, like, what are you eating? What are you drinking? That's part of self-care, like eliminating processed food. So all of this are things. The other thing that I want to throw out there that I feel like is a part of self-care that sometimes people jump over, talking to your therapist. When I tell y'all, when my therapist and I get together every other week, it is the best thing for me since sliced bread. Do you hear me? And I love me some bread, okay? Especially if it's hot and it's like a yeast roll. But anyway, I think it's important for you to do that. And I say that because sometimes we think self-care is just venting to our friends. And one of the things my therapist said to me once, she was like, your friends or your family circle are not trained to carry your baggage and your burden. So don't abuse those spaces. You want to be open, don't get me wrong. But a space, especially if there are parts of you mentally, emotionally, that if you need to decompress, that's a part of self-care. And so again, they're not necessarily sponsoring this, but places like BetterHelp or Psychology Today, if those are things that are self-care too. And a lot of times, especially post-pandemic, there are a lot of free or discounted offerings, even if it's just 30 minutes. If you're working at a job, most jobs have an
They
employee
do.
assistance
They cover.
program or EA. You usually can get 3 or 4 sessions for free from your job. So I would encourage that too, especially if you had major life transitions or events, that can always help you too from a self-care perspective. Well, ladies, this has been really, really good. I've got some tips from you all. I'm sure that we want to hear from you all from the audience as you're watching this, whether it's on a replay at the beginning of the week or the bottom of the week. We would love for you to drop in the comments below some things that you plan to do to implement self-care. And if you already are implementing self-care, tell us not just what you do, but how did you get that going within your house? We want to make sure whether you are the working mom, whether you are the parent of a lovely adult child, or whether you're just the single career professional, that you make time for you. You set the standard for how you're treated, and it starts with the way that you implement self-care. This episode today has been brought to you by Jesus Groupie Clothing. You can always check them out at thejgshop.com. And until next time, clearly take some time for self-care. We love you all, and we'll see you later.
Bye.